Later, on Real Crime, a young mom is planning her dream wedding with a man who seems like the perfect partner and father figure. One night, in a quiet parking lot, she's gunned down, and the story that follows doesn't hold up for long. But first, on Law Over Everything, a 13-year-old girl disappears from a small Texas town. The timeline doesn't add up, and the story keeps shifting. One person close to the case says something early on that ends up haunting the entire investigation. On this Law Over Everything documentary, they cover the disappearance of 13-year-old Haley Dunn. This one leans heavily into the timeline, what people said happened versus what the data actually shows. Haley spends Christmas with her dad, goes home, and by the next day, she's gone. At first, it's treated like a possible runaway, but almost immediately, things just don't seem right. Her room is untouched, nothing is packed, and there's no clear reason she would have left on her own. Then you get into the timeline. The boyfriend in the house says he left for work that morning and gives a fairly specific version of where he was and when. But when investigators look at cell tower data, it doesn't match, not even close. And that's where this case starts to tighten, because now you've got conflicting stories, gaps in time, and behavior that people in town start noticing. Who's searching for her? Who isn't? And who seems more focused on explaining things than finding a missing child? This documentary also leans into what was going on in the house, and that's where it gets darker. There are signs of instability and discoveries during the investigation that raise even more serious questions, like what Haley was dealing with before she disappeared. At the same time, you've got her dad on the other side of the street, searching constantly, pushing for answers, and refusing to let this case fade away. Structurally, this is one of those cases that builds over time. You get the disappearance, then the contradictions, then deeper investigative details. Eventually, a development years later that should bring some level of resolution, but it doesn't really land the way you would expect. This ends up being less about a single moment and more about a long chain of missed opportunities, conflicting narratives, and a case that never quite reaches a clean conclusion. If you're drawn to cases where the timeline itself becomes the evidence and where the frustration with how things were handled is part of the story, this one will stick with you. This Real Crime episode starts off looking like a pretty ideal situation. Teresa is a hardworking single mom, building a life for her and her son. Rob comes in as a quiet, dependable guy who seems to complete the picture perfectly. He bonds with her kid, blends into the family, and they're heading straight toward a big wedding. Then one night, they pull into a secluded parking lot so Rob can give her a surprise from the trunk. Minutes later, Teresa is dead. Rob survives the ordeal with a gunshot wound. He tells police of a random attacker who came out of the darkness, robbed them, and opened fire. At first, that's exactly what it looks like, a sudden, senseless act of violence. But as investigators start digging, things begin to unravel for Rob. You start hearing about money problems, tension in the relationship, and warning signs that didn't quite match the perfect couple image. And little by little, that original story starts sounding a little less solid. What makes this episode work is how it moves from a random crime narrative, a case about appearances, pressure, and the gap between what a relationship looks like and what's actually going on underneath. Based on how this one is structured, there's at least one moment in the investigation where everything flips in a way that viewers won't see coming. Links to these stories are in the description. Share this video and channel with friends who like the very best true crime stories. You'll save their thumbs from getting sore scrolling endlessly. Keep watching Chalk Soup for more true crime stories and where to find them.